Welcome you back to another edition of In the Box. It is Wednesday, and it's our first In the Box for this week. And joining me today, happy to be joined by my colleague, my boy up in the press box, Chris Gawlik, Locked on Golden Knights, Vegas Hockey Now. Chris, what's happening?
Nothing. Another day, another Wednesday, and another day of goaltending drama in Vegas.
We're counting down the hours, right? To the Golden Knights.
5 hours from this moment, at least.
Yeah, the Raiders are done for the season. We got the Super Bowl coming a little bit, but right now, all the focus is on the Golden Knights, and let's just jump right into it. Most recently, they're mired in a 2-6 slide since December 19th. They lose the Winter Classic. The word embarrassingly, I think, is very apropos. Whether they tried or not, the effort was there. They could match the talent, the pace, whatever you want to say. The hype behind that game, you know, when you come out of it 3-0 loser and you're the defending Stanley Cup champs, it's a little embarrassing.
It's fair. I mean, it wasn't good hockey for both teams. The Golden Knights, obviously, we both know this, are really, really good off the rush. And combination of Seattle's defensive strategy that game to keep the Golden Knights to the outside and not allow those deep stretch passes. And then obviously you had the conditions for the ice, and the ice conditions mattered to both teams. It wasn't fair or unfair for the Golden Knights, but it's just the reality. Just was not a great spot for the Golden Knights, and embarrassing, it's not a bad word to use. I mean, it's fair.
What's going on right now in terms of, I mean, we can point to so many different things. You mentioned off the rush, right? We could talk about special teams. We could talk about Logan Thompson, who needs and we're going to get to the goaltenders in a second. But what are you seeing that's the biggest culprit that they need to fix first to allow everything else to fall into place?
I think, I mean, injuries you can't fix. That's just going to happen. So someone else needs to step up. And we saw that Saturday against the Islanders, right? Nicholas Waugh gets 2 goals. Pavel Dorofeev has scored in consecutive games. You need someone besides Jack Eichel, Jonathan Marchessault, Mark Stone, and the household names finding ways to score. It doesn't have to be Nick Waugh getting 2 goals every night or Dorofeev getting 1 goal every night, but you need to see Colasar and Brett Howden's name. We can keep going on and on. Mike Amadio's name, that new makeshift fourth line with Denisenko back there right now. They got to find ways to contribute, not just the top 2 lines. And it's kind of strange because you have the fourth line that's now the third line with Howden, Waugh, and Colasar, and then this new makeshift fourth line with Amadio, Cotter, and Denisenko. That's not a fourth line in the NHL by any means. So we'll see how that goes.
Let's talk about tonight. Huge game, obviously. Golden Knights activate Adin Hill. I don't know if activate's the right word. He's like somewhat already been activated, but he's thrust into the net. He will start in Colorado. He hasn't played since December 17th. You and I are two who have been on the same page for the last 2-3 weeks about Logan Thompson. We picked up on, sort of the mental health aspect, his comments after the Kings game, to your video, to, that went out there. I asked a question to Bruce Cassidy in the win following.
Which was a great question.
This has to be a good move for both goaltenders' sake. Get Adin Hill in there, but also get Logan Thompson some time to rest mentally.
Yeah, and which begs the question, there's this other goalie. His name is Yuri Patera. You ever heard of him? I mean, I don't understand why, like, the prime situation tonight, the plan A, if you will, was Logan Thompson was going to start tonight. And then tomorrow against Boston, it was going to be Adin Hill. And then now they're, I don't know if flip-flopping is the word. We have to see if Logan's going to be okay for tomorrow night's game against Boston. But Adin Hill's coming back a day early. And there were a lot of people concerned that maybe Adin came back a little bit early in the game against Ottawa on December 17th.
When he left.
Then he was there for all of 5 or 6 minutes. We almost had the emergency goalie. Oh, the stuff we heard on the site about that, huh? Right. But, there's a concern that the game is in altitude. I talked about this earlier. Cassidy talked about it today as well. Aiden has to travel now instead of getting that first game at home. And we mentioned about Logan Thompson's workload leading up to this moment. I think Patera had, what, 1 or maybe 2 total appearances in the last 10, 11, 12 games. And, you know, Logan Thompson's done a good job, but he's worn down, and you see it on both sides. You see the concerns after the game and the way he's conducting himself. And then you do see what's happening on the ice. Some of the performances have not been very good. And I asked Kelly McCrimmon about the goaltending situation in the preseason and what his level of faith, I guess, if you will, is in the event Yuri Patera was thrust into action. And McCrimmon had some high marks about him. He felt, in his words, Patera had painted a good enough picture in his mind that he was ready for this next step. Well, Coach Cassidy and Kelly McCrimmon might not be on the same page about Yuri Patera, making a long story longer here.
Which begs the question as we get toward the trade deadline, which we're going to tweet this out for pregame reading. Those of you watching the video, check out the pregame reading at Vegas Hockey Now. You had mentioned about trade prospects and possibilities. Talk a little bit about what you are working on as we get closer to that deadline.
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 paths that the Golden Knights and Kelly McCrimmon could potentially go down. You have the simplest path, which is the path they're on now, kind of similar to last season, where you might see like a Teddy Bluger type of acquisition, assuming the Golden Knights are in the running for the division and to make a run. You could see something similar like last year. Right now you have William Karlsson, Shea Theodore, both out long-term. Shea Theodore, I believe, is LTIR, whereas William Karlsson is IR. But that could free up more salary cap space where the team could make a splash down the line leading up to the trade deadline, similar to how they got Ivan Barbashev last season. This is the last option that we really don't want to get too deep into because Golden Knight fans don't want to acknowledge this, but let's just assume for a second these next 23 games between now and the deadline don't go the way the team would have liked. You got 3 pretty important contracts that are up for renewal in Chandler Stevenson, Jonathan Marchessault, and Alec Martinez. That's roughly $13 million right there. If the Golden Knights, for some reason, are out of contention, does Kelly McCrimmon make a move with 1, 2, or 3 of all of those players to free up cap space and kind of turn the page to next year while improving the prospect pool?
It'll be an interesting conversation. You and I are going to discuss that Saturday up in the press box. We always find something to talk about while we give a bunch of our colleagues crap up there, especially our boy Steve Marsh. So we'll push and bully him around. We'll discuss that. I personally think Marchessault has to stick around. If you're going to have one guy from the original Misfits stick around, even above and beyond Karlsson and Carrier and those guys, I think it's got to be Marchessault. I get what you're saying. Chandler Stevens is a very viable option because he's tradable. I don't know how many people are interested in Martinez, but it's a great topic to talk about. So, yeah, looking forward to it. We're going to tweet that out for pregame reading. Chris, I appreciate you joining us. Golden Knights and Avalanche tonight. Make sure you follow Chris for all of his coverage of that. And tomorrow's home game against Boston, Saturday's home game against Calgary. Chris Gawlik in the box with Willie Ramirez. We'll be back with some special guests this week, including Stephen Wino, including Kate Shefty, including Michael Russo. Big week for In the Box. Chris, thanks.
Thank you.